So, think about the last time you were staring down like an incredibly dense 50-page industry report.
Right, at like 8 in the morning usually.
Exactly. You're exhausted, you have a meeting in 20 minutes, and you really need to sound intelligent. So, what do? You drop the PDF into your favorite AI tool, you ask for a 3-paragraph executive summary, and within, 10 seconds, you're nodding along.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the bullet points down.
Right. You can outline the macro market trends and you just feel completely equipped for your morning stand-up. You feel like you actually know the material.
But see, feeling equipped is a very, very different neurological state than actually possessing structural comprehension.
Yeah.
Because you absorb the output of the report,
Right.
but you entirely skip the friction of synthesis.
Which is the hard part.
Exactly. The actual machinery, the data, like how those conclusions were even reached, the nuances of the methodology, all of that remains a complete black box.
Yeah.
So you have an explanation, sure, but you don't actually have an understanding.
And I feel like we do this constantly now. You watch a 10-minute video essay on the collapse of a foreign economy, or you read a curated news thread about quantum computing, and you just walk away feeling like an absolute expert.
Because we're living in this era that is basically defined by the absolute abundance of explanations.
Right. It's everywhere. The friction of uncertainty has been almost entirely engineered out of our daily lives. Whenever you encounter a gap in your knowledge, a completely seamless explanation is instantly available to just fill it.
And that engineering, it creates this really profound illusion, which is basically the core mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah, so looking at our source material today, we really want to examine that fundamental difference between having something explained to you and actually understanding it.
Right. And the sources suggest that we are currently experiencing a massive structural shift in human cognition. But to even unpack what's happening in our brains, we first kind of have to look at the psychological mechanism that drives us to consume these rapid-fire summaries in the first place.
Right, because we usually assume that we seek out facts because human beings are naturally curious, right? Or because we just despise ignorance, we think of ourselves as these data-hungry creatures.
Well, we like to think that.
We do. But the research points to a completely different driver. It's not actually the intellectual lack of data that bothers us. It's the physical, emotional sensation of uncertainty.
Yes. When you encounter complexity, so say a sudden shift in your industry or a confusing political event or some contradictory piece of scientific news, your brain doesn't just register like a blank cell in a spreadsheet.
It's way more intense than that.
It registers a metabolic threat.
A metabolic threat.
Well, because the human brain is essentially a prediction engine. Its primary job is to anticipate what happens next so it can keep you safe.
Right, survival.
Exactly. So when it encounters ambiguity, its predictive models basically fail. And that failure requires a lot of vigilance. It keeps your nervous system on high alert, running, multiple predictive scenarios simultaneously. And that burns a massive amount of glucose.
So ambiguity literally drains your battery.
Literally.
Okay, so when that AI spits out the neatly packaged bullet points, or that video essay gives you the grand unifying theory of the news cycle, you aren't just gaining data.
No, not at all.
You're experiencing a sudden drop in cognitive pressure. It's basically a relief valve. The brain gets to just collapse all those really taxing, competing predictive models into one single, clean narrative.
And the dopamine hit you feel in that exact moment, it doesn't actually come from the acquisition of truth. It comes from the resolution of ambiguity.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Right. The primary function of an explanation in our modern media ecosystem is actually anxiety reduction.
Yeah.
And because this relief is so immediate and it feels so satisfying, our neurochemistry begins to blur the lines.
You get confused about what we're actually feeling.
Exactly. We start to interpret the emotional state of I feel relieved as the intellectual state of I understand.
Oh, I see. It's sort of like taking a painkiller for a check engine light on your dashboard.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Wow. Right. Like you take the pill, your headache completely goes away, and you just stop worrying about the flashing light. But you did absolutely nothing to look under the hood and see how the engine works or fix the transmission.
Exactly. We are heavily, heavily medicating our reaction to complexity. And this kind of symptom management actually alters the mechanics of how we process reality. Because there's a huge difference between the traditional cognitive loop of understanding and the modern loop we've suddenly adopted.
Walk us through that. What does the traditional loop actually look like?
So if we trace the traditional loop, it's a multi-step, really labor-intensive process. It starts with observation. You notice a phenomenon in the world that just doesn't make sense,
Right.
which leads to the crucial second step, which is the question. And that question carries all that discomfort and metabolic drain we just discussed.
The anxiety of not knowing.
Right. Then, from the question, you formulate a hypothesis,
Mhm.
and then comes the absolute most critical phase reobservation. You take your mental model and you test it against the messy, totally unpredictable real world.
And usually it fails.
Often. And if it fails, you revise. And only after grinding through that really iterative, friction-heavy loop do you finally arrive at genuine understanding.
I mean, I'm thinking about Charles Darwin, right? Just observing those finches. It's like observation, years of questions, decades of hypotheses, endless reobservation, and then finally an understanding of natural selection. It's a grueling journey.
It really is.
But when you have an algorithmic tool sitting between you and the world, it basically amputates the entire middle of that loop.
Totally amputates it. The modern sequence is whittled down to just 3 rapid beats. It's observation, immediate explanation, and the feeling of understanding.
So the question phase is just entirely bypassed.
Completely. We trade the active process of meaning-making for something that cognitive psychologists call cognitive closure.
Cognitive closure.
Yeah, it's this intense desire for a firm answer to a question and a deep, deep aversion toward ambiguity. Because holding a question open requires what the sources call cognitive margin.
Meaning like spare capacity in your brain?
Yes. It takes continuous metabolic energy to keep an unsolved puzzle active in your working memory. Your brain basically has to leave a neural pathway open, constantly checking new data against this unresolved question.
Okay, wait, I want to gently push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because, I mean, the world is incredibly chaotic and we are all so busy. Isn't this drive for cognitive closure basically just a necessary survival mechanism? Like, I have 100 micro decisions to make before lunch. I do not have the cognitive margin to hold every societal, economic, and scientific mystery open in my head simultaneously, you know?
Oh, totally understandable.
If an AI can give me a plausible framework in 2 seconds, why do I need to wallow in the discomfort of the question? Closing the loop just seems like a highly efficient way to survive.
And you're completely right. It is a phenomenal mechanism for short-term task execution. No one is denying that.
Oh.
But the danger highlighted by the source material isn't about getting through your morning meeting. The danger is what happens when this efficiency scales across our entire worldview. When we constantly outsource the friction of reobservation to algorithms, our neural pathways for sustaining curiosity literally begin to atrophy.
Wow.
We lose what the text calls contact time with reality.
Contact time. So that's that period where you're just sitting with the messiness of an issue, testing your assumptions without just rushing to a conclusion.
Exactly. And if we eliminate that contact time by permanently defaulting to rapid closure, our internal model of the world becomes incredibly rigid. It's highly organized, sure, and meticulously categorized, but it's deeply fragile.
It's kind of like, it's like paving over a garden. Like the concrete looks perfectly flat, clean, and totally manageable so you don't have to deal with weeds. But you've completely sealed off the soil.
Right.
Nothing new can ever grow. And the whole ecosystem underneath just suffocates. Keeping the question alive is what keeps the soil breathing.
That is a perfect way to visualize it, because that rigidity dictates how we handle change in the real world. The sources actually present 2 distinct modes of updating our mental models: discontinuous generation and continuous generation.
Okay.
These essentially describe how we generate meaning when our environment shifts. Let's look at the discontinuous model first, which is exactly what happens when your mental garden is paved over with concrete.
Right, so this happens when the external world forces an update on a closed mind.
Exactly.
So let's go back to that knowledge worker. Imagine a major technological shift suddenly just disrupts your entire industry. If you've been relying exclusively on like prepackaged AI summaries and you haven't kept the question of your market's fundamental evolution open, the gradient between your rigid mental model and the new reality is incredibly steep.
Yes, and that steep gradient is a massive problem. The collision between your closed cognitive model and the new reality generates immense friction. The text actually refers to this as reactive heat.
Reactive heat, like actual pain.
Yes, cognitive pain. Because you haven't been continually reobserving the world, the update is incredibly jarring, and it often triggers a defensive response. Your brain perceives the new information not as, an interesting new piece of a puzzle, but as a direct attack on its fundamental architecture.
Which, I mean, we see this reactive heat everywhere today.
Everywhere.
People aren't just engaging in civil disagreement anymore. They are experiencing real physical distress when their closed loops are challenged by a new variable. It feels like a literal threat to them.
But if we shift to continuous generation, which the text describes as keeping the interference field open, the entire dynamic changes completely.
Oh, so.
Well, continuous generation relies entirely on the active presence of the question. In fact, the source material beautifully describes the question as a pain minimization device.
Wait, keeping the uncomfortable question alive minimizes pain?
Yes. Because when you hold an unresolved inquiry in your mind, you maintain this gentle sloped gradient between your internal model and external reality. So as the world naturally changes, the new information simply flows into the open space that you've preserved.
Ah, I see.
The update happens smoothly, right?
Right.
Without the reactive heat of a massive collision, because you never finalized the structure in the first place.
Okay, but this requires a fundamental paradigm shift in what we even consider the end goal of learning to be. The framework we're exploring today from the sources known as Reflective Humanism, it basically argues that understanding isn't a destination.
No, it's not.
It's not a locked file cabinet where you just store facts. It's an active, ongoing posture.
Precisely. Reflective humanism redefines understanding as the active ability to remain in contact with reality while actively preserving the question. And to maintain this ongoing posture, you have to practice contemplation.
Right, but contemplation in this specific context, it's not just like passively observing a sunset or staring at a mountain, right?
No, not at all. It is the rigorous, intentional observation of what we believe we have already solved.
So you're turning the analytical lens inward. You aren't looking for more external data from the world. You're actually examining the architecture of your own certainty.
Exactly. It's a cognitive health scan. It makes your attitude toward knowing much more transparent.
Okay, so bringing this back to our listeners' daily life, how does an individual practically achieve this? Because we established earlier that the human brain aggressively craves closure to save metabolic energy.
Right, it's fighting against this.
Yeah. So if I'm using an advanced AI assistant to analyze complex data every single day, how do I actually live in that unresolved state without feeling that constant anxiety? How do I design an interaction with AI that promotes contemplation rather than just, handing me another painkiller?
It's a great question. The shift lies entirely in changing the parameters of your prompt and the expectation of the output. Instead of using AI as this oracle that just provides definitive closure, reflective humanism suggests we engage it as an atmospheric health scan.
An atmospheric health scan.
Yes. You ask the system to map your cognitive position rather than asking it to solve your problem.
Okay, let's walk through the actual mechanics of that. Let's say I'm a project manager, right? And I've just drafted this comprehensive strategy document for a big new product launch. Normally, I would feed that PDF into an AI and prompt it by asking, hey, is this a solid strategy? Give me a list of actionable improvements to make it perfect.
Right, which means you're asking the machine to do all the reobservation for you.
Yeah.
And just hand you a final answer to close your loop.
Exactly. So to utilize the system as a health scan instead, I have to fundamentally alter the instruction. So I feed the document into the AI and I prompt it with something like, analyze this strategy document and explicitly identify the underlying assumptions I've made about consumer behavior, supply chain stability, and market conditions.
And you add constraints.
Right, like do not offer solutions, do not grade the strategy, just reflect back the premises I am currently treating as settled facts.
And doing that dramatically alters the relationship with the technology. The AI output is no longer a new checklist of tasks to complete so you can feel relieved. It's a mirror.
Yeah.
It processes its latent space and comes back to you saying, you are operating on the assumption that the target demographic values speed over customization, and your budget assumes raw material costs will remain static despite current geopolitical tensions.
Wow.
It doesn't tell you what to do about those assumptions. It just exposes the concrete you've poured over your mental garden.
It's basically providing what the text calls a filtered transparency. It reveals the blind spots in your certainty, but without forcing a finalized alternative meaning onto you.
Exactly. It creates cognitive buoyancy. You are forced to physically re-engage with the question phase of the learning loop because the AI has gracefully pointed out that your feeling of understanding was actually just an unchecked assumption, wrapped in a feeling of relief.
Right. It basically unpaves a square of the soil.
Yeah.
But, this requires incredible discipline from the user. And honestly, it demands a highly specific architectural design from our technology, too. If we are going to build tools that act as atmospheric health scans, they have to be optimized for reflection, not just for speed and synthesis.
Absolutely. The algorithm has to be fundamentally designed to occasionally refuse the role of the oracle.
Which brings us back to the explicit question driving this entire deep dive today. Is understanding the ability to seamlessly explain a concept? Or is it the ability to remain deeply connected to what is still unknown?
That is the core tension.
Yeah, because we started by looking at a professional grabbing a quick AI summary just to survive a morning meeting, and that efficiency is undeniably intoxicating.
Oh, for sure. We all use it.
But if we structurally trade the friction of reobservation for the comfort of rapid closure, we lose the capacity to adapt without pain. When the macroeconomic realities or the social paradigms inevitably shift, those collisions are only going to become more severe.
Right. If the tools of explanation are only going to become faster and more predictive and more seamlessly integrated into our daily cognition, the primary intellectual challenge of the future is no longer finding the answer.
No.
The challenge is preserving the space where our questions can continue to live.
Which really leads to a final thought for you to just sort of mull over on your own. We often imagine a future where a super intelligent system can instantly illuminate every single mystery of the human experience, right? We imagine this total frictionless clarity.
A perfect oracle.
Right. But if that atmospheric health scan eventually reaches a point where it can meticulously map our biases and explain our reality with absolutely zero latency, perhaps its most profound function wouldn't be the knowledge it dispenses at all.
Right.
Perhaps its greatest value will be forcing us to realize that the unresolved silence of not knowing, the actual friction of the question itself, was the very mechanism that generated human meaning in the first place.
I love that. The ambiguity isn't a bug in human cognition. It is the engine.
It really is. Keep the question alive. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.